But when we put these false deadlines on ourselves, or let's rather call them imposed, willful,
Yes.
aggressive deadlines, we're forgetting that we're whole people. And it's almost like we're punishing ourselves, saying, you should be able to accomplish this. If you don't accomplish this, then you will have failed. So you better get your act together and you better get moving on this thing. A little pressure is important.
Mhm.
Naturally, it is important for us to be motivated at some level. But if the motivation isn't really coming from inside, if we're not really driven to deliver on something that really internally matters to us, the rest of it's all false.
Hi, I'm Glennis Woods Mullins, and I love to help women to vibe, to be more vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and empowered in midlife. So come on, let's vibe. I've been hearing quite a bit about this whole thing about the nervous system deregulation and how to get it under control and why it's happening and how it seems to be happening in particular for women in midlife, women over 40. And for the women that you work with, what's the first step? What's the first thing that you ask them to do to begin that journey of reconnecting with themselves?
Is to think back like what they used to love, right? What was it that you used to love to do that you no longer do? And surprisingly, it's answers like, I used to love going and working out, or I love going and running and having that solitude or those moments to myself. And they forget that. They've put all of it on the back burner because they got to get the kids to school, they got to make dinner, they got to do whatever else they're doing. But they've forgotten the little things that used to bring them so much joy, be it
Right.
exercising or running or going to hang out with girlfriends. They've put on the back burner because it's not important. I'll
Well,
do it later.
all kinds of reasons why this is happening. Majority of the reason is that it can be hormonally driven, but also a lot of it has to do with the trauma that's been sitting in our bodies for so long that we've never really processed through. And so now our poor parasympathetic system is in a permanent state of flight or fright. It's all the time. The reality is that we need to get out of that. And how do we establish clarity in the midst of all of that? That's why I'm so excited to introduce to you Sanaya Mehta. I hope I'm pronouncing that. She is the founder of Design Your Next, a program helping ambitious women reclaim their purpose and design success on their own terms. Sounds like it's a perfect conversation of what's going on right now because so many women have issues around making decisions. They know they want to make a change. They know they're in transition, but how to actually implement the things they want to do, how to actually accomplish some of the things on their bucket list sometimes gets to be overwhelming. So welcome. It's wonderful to have you here on the V.I.B.E Living podcast today.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
First of all, please tell me how to pronounce your name correctly.
It's Sunaina.
Sunaina. Okay.
And the easiest way to remember it, fortunately or unfortunately, is it rhymes with banana.
Sunaina Banana. You're right. Very good. Welcome to the V.I.B.E Living podcast. So tell me, how did you get into this whole idea of creating a strategy for someone to design their next particular episode in life?
I think a lot of this comes from myself and the observation within the systems I've lived in, cultural systems, the corporate business systems, the social systems that are set up and that happen to me or to us. We work towards ambition and finding our place, whether that is as a mother or a career person or whatever else role we feel assigned to play. We find ourselves having those defined for us. And I found that time and time again throughout my life. I have moved countries a few times back and forth between the United States and India. I have looked at arranged marriage, considered it. I've been married. I've been divorced. I have been a VP at a corporation. And every time I have found myself questioning whether my ambition was truly my own or was it assumed rank and position based on the structures that are already in place. And I keep coming back to authorship. So for me, that really has been the journey. And Design Your Next is born around this inquiry of, do we author our position, or how might we author our position in life so that those systems don't happen to us? We create our own.
That makes so much sense. And it's interesting because you're right. We have a tendency to get pigeonholed into what is expected of us. And I think what happens around 40 or so, we began to start examining that. Is this really what I want to do with the rest of my life? Or is this all there is? Or is there something else that I'm missing? Or in some cases, something feels like it's missing. And many times women get stuck on not just identifying what it is that might be missing or that they want to do, but how to go about implementing it. How many of you out there have had these great ideas of things you want to do, and everybody says, this is great. And then a year or two later, you're talking with your girlfriend, she said, hey, whatever happened to that idea? And you're like, what kinds of things can you tell women that will help them become more strategic and actually implement the things that they've dreamed about or talked about?
I like to say that clarity without action is theory, to your point. It's theory. It lives in our minds. We feel clear. We feel we know. We feel that voice inside whispering to us. But we have to practice. And we have to practice out loud, which means we have to do things, right? We have to act, even if they're small things, tiny experiments. We have to nudge ourselves to work out loud and to allow some level of visibility. We don't give ourselves permission to do that. And we find the structures that are in place keep us small. But to find that voice inside and to listen to it is very difficult. So, to your point, to move out from that realm of thinking, you have to move to small steps of doing. This is very critical because in the doing, you create a ripple. And in the ripple, you start to see where else you might go, or opportunities might happen, or possibilities might occur, or people, your tribe, the people who resonate with who you are and what you're about, and who want that for themselves too, they step up. They actually appear. It's magical.
What's interesting is the old adage about how do you eat an elephant, and it's one bite at a time. And I have found in the 19 years that I've been building my business, I left corporate America at 51 and decided to do something. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do. All I knew was what I didn't want to do. And it was amazing how those small little incremental steps probably became even more important than the big aha moments because they were building blocks to where it was I wanted to go. And I've also noticed that with the women that I work with, because I'm in wellness, but many times it's the incremental steps that give you the validation once you've completed them to keep going. Because probably one of the hardest things for me to maintain was my motivation, because it wasn't like I was sitting in my office with my staff outside my office and I can go out and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or going to staff meetings or any of those kinds of things. There wasn't that kind of reinforcement. And we live in a society where reinforcement is a big deal. So taking a look at women who want to make that change and want to be able to make that first step of that first aha or that first accomplishment, what do they need to do to keep themselves motivated before they get that first aha?
The one word that comes to mind is alignment. We have ambition, we have a desire to move in a direction, but the most important thing is to first align with your own identity. And we layer on so much on top of our identities. The roles, again, prescribed, or the expectations or obligations we feel as women, as leaders, as mothers, etc., right? So you have to be able to take the journey to peel some of that back to say, this is actually who I am. This is what energizes me. This is the creative or play pattern I've had in my life. And therefore, this is what I know will lead me to flow, and to believe in that. So when you come back to recognizing what your identity is, defining really your why, which isn't an easy thing to do, defining that, you start to then believe. And again, one small action reinforces belief, grows it, expands and strengthens belief. More belief, more direction. Direction becomes self-evident when you build self-trust. But again, that will only happen if you act.
That first step is just actually acting. But let's say you do that first step and you're beginning to get the validation, you're beginning to get the feedback like, okay, I'm doing well. Things are going well, and you're beginning to achieve some of those things that you've always wanted to do. You feel like you got some clarity, you're being more strategic. And then all of a sudden, things begin to like plateau. How do you deal with that? Because the plateau is very interesting. As they say, that separates the girls from the women or the men from the boys, is how do you maintain during a plateau? What's the best way to deal with that?
I always go back to your why, because the why itself is a journey. It's not a destination, your
Mhm.
purpose, if you will. And when you hit what you believe is a plateau, you again look to that why and you look for where you're energized. So if you're hitting that plateau, you may need to go back and look at your signal again. I like to think of it as when we have a strong signal, things start to happen, they start to show up. So I always say, go back to the center of you, stay and make sure you're still in your body. I think when you plateau, you start to lots of things start to happen. Lots of opportunities start to happen. And then because of that, you start to spread yourself too much. And then when you do that, you start to fail. You start
Mhm.
to fail. And then you start to lose that energy and that excitement that you once had. So for the most important thing is to go back to myself, live in my body, feel in my body, remember to feel the senses again, right? A lot of the work that I do centers around that sensory interaction or engagement that's not only intellectual. Watch out for being too much in your head.
Mhm.
Because I think you plateau when you start to live in the intellect and not in the body too. You're not aligned again. So go back to
That's
that.
That's interesting. Alignment is very key. That's for sure. And we could talk forever about how to achieve that. But I have something else because generally speaking, women who are especially high achieving and they reach those plateaus and they begin to try to do things to make things happen. And I know for me that whenever I'm pushing, it's not going to work. No matter what the data might say in terms of that it should work, if I'm pushing the square peg into the round hole, trying to push it in there, then I know I've learned that then maybe that's not what I'm supposed to do. So where does intuition kick in when it comes to the other part of your mind that wants to count on the data in terms of why you're doing this and it's not working? Where does the intuition come in?
I feel like it comes in all the time. I feel like sometimes we hear it. I've heard it my whole life. I can go back as far as, or even the most recent, when I completely changed everything 2 to 3 years ago. My intuition was always speaking to me inside. In fact, sometimes we call what people call imposter syndrome. I call that your intuition potentially
Hmm.
saying it's not that you're not enough or that you don't belong in this room. It's because you actually don't belong in this room because this room isn't right. This isn't it.
Mm.
So we mislabel our intuition as it's the irrational, it's not reasonable, therefore it's wrong. Or if it's working for everybody else, then that voice I'm hearing is just my frustration or fear. But it maybe, I believe it's actually, if you listen and you pay attention, it's actually your intuition telling you something. So I think it plays all the time. It's whether or not you give it that credence and you are willing to hear it is what changes.
That's interesting because talking about overwhelm and strategic thinking, sometimes we get so overwhelmed, it's hard to hear that voice. Or other times, that voice is there, but we don't want to stop to listen to it because we're afraid that it might be something that we'll hear that we don't want to do, that we know we really should do, but we don't want to do it. So we get stuck in this place sometimes of not being productive because of a sense of overwhelm and also afraid of getting quiet. How do you help women get past that?
Yeah, fear is it's a big thing, right? So just the fear of the unknown. And the way to get past fear is to embrace it. Is what we talk about this always. What is the fear? What if you're harnessing that fear? Because courage is really you overcoming or working with rather your fear. It isn't that the fears go away. I have fears all the time. But to navigate fear is I'll do something as practical, let's say, as draw your monster. What's it look like? Give it a shape. There's this, do you know Hayao Miyazaki's Studio Ghibli, the Japanese animation guru? He had a little fear icon on his desk that he would keep. It was this little hunched over golem looking thing. And the whole point of that was if it's in front of me, it's less scary. Like if I can see it, if I can tangibilize it. So the point is draw your monster, name your fear, know what it is, what it looks like. It starts to diminish. That's something very practical that I talk to my cohorts about. The other is harness it. As a woman, the fear is actually, if you think about what's inside us, even as our energy, that is actually a motivation and an impetus too. So why not look at it differently? Not as a thing that's holding you back, but as the thing that you are challenged to overcome with the strength that's in you. It's you have the strength to match, actually to exceed it. Look at it that way. And go back to small actions. Small actions will show you that your fear can be diminished. It won't go away. It won't go away. Know how to diminish it as you
We
move.
got to learn to coexist with it. I tell my clients sometimes when they're struggling to make the lifestyle changes that they need, and there's a fear in it, not so much because they're afraid to make the lifestyle change, but there's always this thing, what if it doesn't work? I'm putting in all this effort and it doesn't work. And sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. And I always talk a lot about reframing. What if it does? And you won't know. You won't know until you give it a try, because what if it does work? And sometimes I'll say, focus on how you would feel if it did work, and take that feeling and bring it to you right now and sit in that. So many times, and it's interesting because learning to reframe our thoughts is so critical during midlife because of all the transition and transformation and all the other thoughts that are going through our minds. And with all the different roles that we play right around this time of life, reframing is the way I survive. My husband calls it denial, but no, it's not denial. It's just trying to look at the glass half full instead of half empty, trying to find something positive or some kind of key learning in every experience to give me the energy to keep going. That, yeah, this kind of hurts a little bit, but on the other side of this is going to be this.
I love to say, like, the only place to know yourself is to go to the unknown.
Mm.
How else are you going to know yourself if you strip away all the things that anchor you right now and that hold you up, and you just strip them away, theoretically or in real, but let's think about this, right? That's when you're going to have to hold on to yourself.
Mm.
When you're in the unknown, none of the known factors exist. Then you get to know who you are. So you really want to get to know yourself again. You've got to reframe and see the unknown as a place of great curiosity and discovery. That's what the unknown looks like. And yeah, is it dark? Sure, but there'll be a horizon. And I always just go step, leap, new horizon.
That's right. And nothing lasts forever. Whatever situation you're in that is causing the fear, that's not going to last forever. I used to think that way when I was in labor with my four daughters at different times, not all at the same time. And how I got through, people said, how did you get through it? Because you didn't use any anesthesia. And one was a vaginal breach, and another one was in the car on the way to ED. Another one I had to drive like maybe 60 miles because I was just determined to be delivered by a midwife. And of course, this all involved pain. And so I said, I just kept telling myself, nothing lasts forever. This pain isn't going to last forever. And on the other side of this pain is going to be a healthy little baby girl on the other side of it. So I'm just going to keep going through it. And I think it's interesting because when you look back at the traumatic things that have happened in our lives, you begin to realize that part of the trauma was the way we encoded it and not necessarily the trauma itself. The way we told the story, the way we thought about it, the way we let it sit in our bodies. And I'd like to say that the body keeps a score. And so therefore, the quicker you get out of you some of those angst, some of the negativity, some of the fear, some of the bad memories, some of the unforgiveness, the sooner you get out of that, get it out of you, it frees space for more wonderful things to come to you. So that brings me to another question, and that is, how do you get, especially high driving leaders, women who have been successful in the past, to reconnect with that inner power and to get over any self-doubt that they do come across, because they have self-doubt too? How do you get them to move past that?
Couple things. One is support. I have to just shout out to support and a set of strong women on a journey together. I think it's very important. Community is very important. The other is to go back. So we often, especially high achieving women, we have plans. We have plans to do all these things, and we know how we're going to go A to B to C to D. We know the plan of the plans, and it's all laid out in our minds or even on paper. But the reality is that I think you need to start with not the outcomes and the direction, because we all know what happens to plans. The unexpected always happens,
Right,
the unknown
right.
is always there, is to start from the origin. So you start from yourself, your true self. And I see that place as your place of play. And that again is where presence comes. And as we grow up and as we layer on, we lose our connection to play, which is where we were at our most intuitive, where we lost track of time because we were so in the moment, where we were truly in flow. That is a place I start. I start with reminding them of what those patterns looked like, what those joys were, why they drove them, and what made them tick. So we start there, not from the MBA model, is what I call it. We're going to get to this goal and this thing and that thing and these 5 things, which I've been in corporate, and so have you, long enough to know those things never play out even
Right.
in the most
No,
places.
it used to always blow my mind that we would start planning for the year in January. And I'm thinking, okay, how good is this really going to be? Because the year's already started. I wouldn't say it was an exercise in futility, but it was like an opportunity for everybody to hear themselves talk and pontificate and everything else. But meanwhile, our staff is sitting there, yeah, right. Meanwhile, I got all this stuff on my desk. I don't know if we'll ever get to that. But I never could figure out, why are we talking about what's going to be happening for this year in January? Why aren't we talking about that in November? And it wasn't that it wasn't happening. But sometimes we get stuck in doing things a certain way. And no one ever stops and says to themselves, well, why am I doing it this way? Because I've always done it. But what if I did something different? What a concept. What if I pulled my staff together and my team together in September to talk about what's going to happen the following year? How would that change? And I think sometimes if we take a chance in trying something different, just because, not because the other way hasn't worked, but because you haven't tried something else, sometimes that can spur on other kinds of intuition and creativity also.
I consider it so even within the work I do, when I say we're going to create a plan, the plan is the plan to how do we get the ball rolling, because it's an unfolding. So the plan is almost weekly. It's based on what happened and what I did. Therefore, this is what I'm doing next and next. It is an unfolding. And we have to be relaxed with the reality that we're not controlling everything. We cannot control. We all have those dreams. They don't happen. So it is in the allowing of things for things to unfold that the real plans actually get executed.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
And time is relative. It goes by so fast. But I've also found out in being an entrepreneur that my prayer has always been, God, universe, speed up time when I need you to speed up time, and slow down time when I need you to slow down time. Once again, another form of reframing when I feel like I'm up against a deadline and I'm getting really nervous because I'm not quite where I feel I need to be. Of course, these are always self-imposed deadlines. And so I'll say, okay, can you slow down time? And that's interesting, isn't it? The things that we do to ourselves that are things that we have created for ourselves as Geiger counters or as points of what we determine that will determine us to be successful or not. And sometimes I have to stop myself and say, wait a minute, the only boss I have is me. Why am I what's going to happen if I don't make this deadline? What's really going to happen? And I think sometimes we give ourselves these false ways of evaluating what success is.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, time is finite, certainly. But when we put these false deadlines on ourselves, or let's rather call them imposed, willful,
Yes.
aggressive deadlines, we're forgetting that we're whole people. And it's almost like we're punishing ourselves, saying, you should be able to accomplish this. If you don't accomplish this, then you will have failed. So you better get your act together and better get moving on this thing. A little pressure is important. Naturally, it is important for us to be motivated at some level. But if the motivation isn't really coming from inside, if we're not really driven to deliver on something that really internally matters to us, the rest of it's all false.
Then it's time to take a look. Then, as you say, go back to why am I really doing this? I have one of these things that I kind of measure in terms of whether or not I'm fooling myself or not. I have the old-fashioned planner with my to-do list. I've got things on the computer too. I'm mostly paperless except for my journal with all my to-do lists. And I will do a data dump of everything that I want to get accomplished for the week, everything I can think of. Okay. And then I began to A1, B1, whatever, and take them over to the pages for each day. Right. My rule of thumb is that if I'm carrying something over for 2 or 3 days and it still hasn't gotten done, it must not be that important. So why is it on the list? And that's how I've survived and gotten so much done, is because I'm constantly reprioritizing. Because things change, circumstances change. You get a new client, and that client wants something totally different, which you know you can do, but it's taking you outside of some of your other goals. But he's, hey, I want to do that. Things change. And I think sometimes we need to allow ourselves to be flexible. It's okay if you change in the midst of whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.
There's a framework that I give women whom I work with, which is, it's very simple. It's 2 dimensions. It's like the urgent, important, that Eisenhower matrix, but it is what's essential versus negotiable. So stuff you're required that you have to do, and versus stuff you could negotiate, and energizing versus depleting. So for me, because I think while time is finite, energy can be generated. Something can generate more energy and excitement around you. And some things, which you can give even less time to, can be incredibly depleting from an energy perspective. Even if you spend an hour on that thing, it can pull you down so much, right? So I asked them to actually recognize their week, their lives, their daily activities in the form of a 2x2 on this: essential, negotiable, and energizing, depleting. And we started to,
Essential, negotiable, energizing, and depleting. I love
yes.
that.
And what I find is that the stuff that is essential, let's say essential and depleting, what can you do to optimize those things? You have to do them. So how do you optimize them? Where can we create space in our lives by figuring out how to tighten those up if we can? Things that are depleting and negotiable, you need to start pushing some of those out of your day, out of your life. Those things need to probably go. So what can go from there? Imagine the space you're creating just by looking at those activities and going, there is time here, there is space here, there's emotional space here, not just physical, but emotional and or temporal. And then if you look on the other side of that, what is energizing and essential? You need to double down on some of those things. Those are the things going to help. Those things are going to make.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because for me, one of the things that I have to do, I have to make sure that I move every day, because I'm sitting behind this desk. And in another life, I was a dancer and was dancing until I was 63. And finally, I stopped because I thought, gee, I don't want to be one of those people that say, she really needs to sit down. But at 68, I may not be dancing anymore, but I know that movement is essential in order for me to stay connected with myself. So I make time for that. Even though I don't have the time, I reframe it and say, I do have the time. It's just all about prioritizing. And I love what you said about the depleting and negotiable, because many times the things that we just have to do that we hate to do, that are depleting, sometimes ultimately aren't ultimately that important to your ultimate goal. And of course, there's always that word called delegation. Things that really is okay. We don't have to have our hand in every single pot.
No, and those things that are let's say with energizing and negotiable, I want you to do more of that. Those are things that you need to bring in more, actually protect. So how do we allow ourselves in the rhythm of our lives some breath? Those are where we're finding it. And we had a whole conversation the other day in one of my cohorts on laundry and the dishes. And these can actually be delegated. If your time is worth it to at a certain level and you can afford it, you need to be bringing in outside help for that thing. If that, Yeah.
You're not going to get an argument with me about that. Absolutely. And that's interesting too, affordability and things that you say you can't afford versus that you can't afford and everything else. Once again, it's all about prioritization and what's most important to you and what's going to help you get to your goals, whatever that is, or your objectives or the intentions that you've set that much more quickly. Sometimes we just have to get out of our own way and the conversations that we're having in our head. And from what I hear you saying is take a look at intuition and letting that be your ultimate guide.
Yeah, don't discount intuition, but listen for it. So that overwhelm happens. There is some space that can be relieved. There's always that space that can be relieved, either emotionally, physically, temporally, like it's there. You just have to look at it and then listen for your intuition, because I'm telling you, don't discount your intuition as somebody's imposter syndrome. Don't discount that it's saying, look at the systems, Linus, and the patriarchal systems themselves. Yes. Of course you don't belong in that room. That room is a mess.
Right. Is a mess full of all kinds of male energy that makes you sick. That's a whole nother conversation. Right. There's all kinds of reasons why women started having all these different issues with their bodies and things like that. And while feminism, I guess, was important in order to get us in the workplace and to achieve some things, there's some other things, though, that are just akin to our spirit. Just doesn't go with us. Some of the things that happen in corporate America, I think we both can agree that if women were running all this stuff, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in now. So,
yeah.
Sorry, now listeners, I'm right. That's why you're listening today. But it's so true. It's so true. It has been so refreshing talking with you. And I know you, since you're on the podcast talking about what it is that you do, you also work with clients virtually.
I do. So in fact, my cohort that I've called the power formation cohorts, where we actually move from who are we becoming to structuring what it is that you do next, that's virtual and global. So I'll bring people in from different parts of the world onto a 90-minute session, along with other things, of course. But yes, virtual and global and very intimate, only 6 women at a time.
Oh, that's fantastic. For those of you who want to find out more about what Sunaina does, did I say that right? Sunaina? Yes. I've achieved something today. Please go ahead and take a look at her links in the show page. She's got a wonderful website. She's also on Instagram and LinkedIn. And if you're struggling with clarity and strategy and basically accomplishing those things that are near and dear to your heart, and you need someone to help break it down, as you can see, she knows her stuff. Please go ahead and reach out to Sunaina. Sunaina, thank you so much for being on the V.I.B.E Living podcast. It's been wonderful having you.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time. And the listeners' time.
Yes, thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And thanks for making us in the top 5% of podcasts globally, not just wellness podcasts, but all the podcasts. I'm really proud of that. And you know what I'm going to say, right? I know there's 3 million podcasts out there. So when you're in the top 5%, you're like number 300, whatever, 1,000, whatever. But that's okay. You're there, you're listening. And it looks like every week we get more downloads. So please share the podcast, download the podcast, and also take a look at all the other 170 odd some podcasts that we have done. It's been wonderful bringing women like Sunaina to you to share different ways that they vibe, different ways that they're more vibrant, more intuitive, beautiful, and empowered to live a great midlife. Thanks so much for listening. Have a fantastic day. And don't forget to vibe. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for listening to the V.I.B.E Living Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and share this podcast. Have a fantastic day, and don't forget to vibe. Bye-bye, everybody.